As for the actual issue, again, questions back and forth in the parliament today. We want to follow this thing through because this is going to be a major issue. Now, much of the media didn't talk about it today. You'd have to send out a search party to find stories on most of the news websites. Of course, when it's one person on a climate change protest burning a pram, all the cameras are there. When it's farmers taking a few days off from work, meaning they will lose money this week, to make a point about an industry being shut down for purely ideological reasons and green and teal preferences, I don't know, nothing to see here. But here again was the questions inside the parliament.
In the gallery today are farmers whose livelihoods depend on the live sheep export industry. If the government continues with its ban on live sheep exports, Sudan is one country that will take up Australia's share of this market. Prime Minister, who has higher animal welfare standards, Sudan or Australia?
And will it surprise you that the very government who's put this thing in place, remember, whenever they have a bad idea, even if it's hounded down like it was in 2010, when they turned off the live cattle exports overnight because they saw something that animal activists were able to get, unsurprisingly and uncritically, onto Four Corners. Remember, not footage about Australia, but footage of what was happening in Indonesia. Well, of course, they just slowly hibernated for a couple of elections, then shoved it under the door in a supposed climate change election or a supposed change of government election because cost of living was so bad under the last mob and they were going to make it better under this. Oh, that's right. Well, again, here's the response, or lack of, from the people who are proud of what they're doing.
I pointed out was that when the leader of the National Party came into government in the first year, in 2014-15, 2.1 million sheep were exported by sea at a value of $224 million. In the last year in which they held office, there were 475,000 sheep were exported by sea at a value of $80 million.
So if, according to that, the industry is slowly but surely dying off, why do you have to kill it off, Prime Minister? No one wants to follow up those questions, do they? Preferences, teals and greens. Now, let's get to the aged care stuff. This really matters. Now, you know that it's a difficult story to talk about on television because there's not an awful lot of dramatic pictures that we can show you, apart from generic footage of what happens in aged care, and strength and love to anyone who's got a family member in there or people that are watching us right now on television from there. But the aged care minister, well, she, of course, is trying to go in a take-it-or-leave-it situation to change the amount of money that you will have to spend on your own care. Now, again, we've been following this all the way through. The Australian newspapers reporting suggests that this will cost you an extra $40,000 if the government got its way, suggesting that some self-funded retirees entering nursing homes after July next year will face $40,000 extra of having to pay. Meantime, the Roll Gold Standard on much reporting out of Canberra, I'm sure he loves when I say it, but still, I'm an avid reader and follower of his comments. Phil Coorey, well, he's been following all of this from the reports last year to the reports that were buried this year to the negotiations that have happened all this year. And remember, what has he been talking about? He says that the reforms, based on the recommendations of the government-chaired task force, include lifting the lifetime contributions cap for residential care from $76,000 to $190,000. The cap would go all together when it comes to home care. So, potentially, in this legislation being negotiated, is the cap would be added by $120,000 if you go into an aged care facility, but if, like half of all people who are involved in the aged care system, where you have the at-home or home care version, there'd be no limit to what you could be charged. Well, this was supposed to be done and dusted a couple of weeks ago, and now it looks like it won't be done this week. That is because the opposition is now turning around and saying that they don't like the deal that is currently on the table. Now, Peter Dutton apparently was going to present the deal today, and the negotiated deal to Shadow Cabinet and then the wider members of the opposition, but they say they don't have enough time to work out whether this is the deal they want to do. Because accordingly, the opposition has only received a report from government a week ago that's 550 pages, i.e. the piece of legislation, 550 pages, less than a week to work out whether you back it or not, because we've got it all, this could have been done months ago, but they hid the report, in the lead up to the Dunkley by-election. They buggerised around for months and months. So the deadlines are artificial here. They are all of Labor's making. This kind of detail that older Australians and their families deserve to know means that they are slowing down the process. And I think anyone on the Liberal side who would suggest there should be no cap at all when it comes to what 50% of people do when it comes to the aged care system, being taking care of yourself at home or trying to stay in your home for as long as possible, there would be understandable outrage. So I don't know whether that cap is being introduced, isn't being introduced, where it's being introduced. Presumably it's in that legislation. But until I know, I'm working off the reporting that we have had to this point. Richard Colbeck, of course, former aged care minister, knows about the system, and he says today that some of the people who may well end up being declared quote-unquote wealthy in this are people who are on a part pension. The former aged care minister has urged caution from the coalition before accepting the aged care bill, saying the proposed increases of contributions for quote-unquote wealthy Australians could unfairly hit part pensioners. Senator Colbeck said that while he recognised that some people in aged care were being considered as wealthy and are therefore being made to pay more. But what does wealthy mean? The senator continues to say, since the release of the Aged Care Task Force report, the repeated mantra from the government has been the wealthy will pay more for aged care. The question is, what's wealthy? Who are the extra 20% that we might be talking about here? That's the answer to the question. And those are the people who are currently on the part pension. I'm sure those Australians who receive part pensions will be delighted to hear their newly found status as wealthy, because that's what the government is saying about this very situation. Good, great, solid, important point. Slow it down. Let's all hear what the caps are, rather than them do a dirty deal 5 minutes to midnight before they all bugger off and everyone starts talking about the footy finals this weekend. Slow the process down or give us more information between now and when everyone buggers off for yet another break from Parliament.